Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Eric. I'm your OPA president, and we're so glad to host this town hall tonight. There's certainly so many rich things to discuss right now. And certainly thank you to Lexi and Allison for your gracious willingness to have me and celebrity guest star Michael Ranney, who is our CEO of the Ohio Psychological Association, be your interlopers. We will be here to kind of help moderate and try to respond with profound wisdom, although if you know Michael and I, Michael will be the profound wisdom, I'll be the comic relief. But this is really exciting to see each of you connected to our state graduate student association. And so having said that, I'd like to introduce our two moderators. So first we have Lexi, and Lexi, it's Lexi, right? Not Alexandria?
Right.
You're right. So Lexi is a fourth-year clinical psych doctoral student at Case Western Reserve University. She serves as our chairperson of OPAGS board. She earned her undergraduate degree in psychology with a minor in human development and family studies from Kent State, which is also my doctoral alma mater. So it's always great to see the Golden Flashes represented, especially in this cohort, since I think we don't have too many Golden Flashes. Lexi's clinical and research interests focus on the etiology, maintenance, and treatment of anxiety and related disorders in children and parents. You're particularly interested in how family functioning and parenting practices and familial traits contribute to these disorders in both populations. Currently, she is on placement at Metro Health Medical Center, providing care to some of Cleveland's most underserved patients. So thank you, Lexi, and thank you for your service on the OPA board. It's really been a delight this last year to have you serve with us and for your leadership. And then we have Allison Sylvia. She's a third-year clinical psych doctoral student at the University of Cincinnati. She graduated from that state up north, realizing that she needed to have a much more profound football experience coming to Ohio. And her undergraduate is in biopsychology, cognition, and neuroscience. Her research interests are in the effects of anxiety and cognitive processes and mindfulness-based interventions for anxiety and trauma. Allison right now is currently doing her clinical placements at the Counseling and Psychological Services at the University of Cincinnati, as well as the University of Cincinnati Health Stress Center, and she is the Social Responsibility Chair for OPAGS. So if you have not participated in one of these town halls before, we will have the chat open, and so between Michael and me, we will certainly try to field questions just so it's not a free-for-all. If you do not have a chat window, depending on how you're interfacing with us, if you're at least on a app or a desktop, if you kind of wiggle your mouse or your pointer, there should be a little bar that opens up for chat, and we will try to moderate those questions. If you are not talking, if you could kindly set your cell phones in your audio on stun or at least mute so that we don't have a lot of ambient noise. And then at this point, I'd like to turn this over to Lexi and Allison, and certainly welcome each of you again on behalf of the Ohio Psychological Association, and thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Thanks for the introduction and for joining us, and to Michael, and thank you all for taking some time out of a busy end of the week night and coming and kind of joining together. So I wanted to first really explain kind of where the idea for this came from and what we hope to accomplish here. And back in our April board meeting, the OPAGS board really spent the majority of our meeting just talking about the changes, coming to term with them, and their impact on our education, on our research, on our clinical work. And we found ourselves noticing that it was really helpful to hear from other programs across the state. You know, even just between Allison and myself, I'm up in Cleveland and Allison's down in Cincinnati. So, you know, between the two of us, there's two very far programs, and most of us don't connect with other graduate psychology programs in Ohio unless you have a personal connection. So we found it really beneficial, and we decided, why not open this up and this opportunity to all of our OPAGS membership, because this is who we're serving. It's helpful for us to connect and share these concerns, but we wanted to have the opportunity for everyone to share in this. And as well, OPA has been, doing a number of these types of programs for their members who are, licensed psychologists, and we wanted to offer a similar service. So before I turn it over to Allison really quickly, I really just want to encourage you guys to keep this an open forum and keep it an open space for your questions and concerns. Alice and I are moderating the discussion, and we're here to do so, but we really want to hear from you. We want to hear what your questions are, your concerns are, the impact of COVID-19 on your graduate experience. And like Eric said, please feel free to use the chat too if you feel more comfortable, but that's really our goal here. We don't have really a structured program or anything. We want to keep it up to what will suit your needs and as all of us together. So thank you again for coming and joining us. And with that, I'll shift gears over to Allison.
Yeah, so thanks, Lexi. I think that's an awesome introduction to the town hall. And just like you said, I really envision this as a place for us to just talk about what we're experiencing. I know I have questions about how other programs are dealing with certain issues, like I know that how to count phone hours has been a big question for me. And I'm just wondering what other people are doing. So I think there's kind of those technical aspects of the program, but then just generally how COVID has affected you and your work. So whichever direction you guys want to take it, but I would love to first just open it up and say, 19 over the last month or so, like what stands out to you?
Allison, I think you broke up for like a second. Do you mind repeating the last part of what you said?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So very general question. I'm breaking up still?
No, you're okay.
Good. Awesome. This is really great with patients. It's super fun. But yeah, just generally, what is your guys' experience in your programs with coronavirus? How have programs reacted and how have you reacted? Just general.
I can talk a little bit about Wright State. Let me turn my video on. Oh, there we go. So I'm Kristen. I'm a third year at Wright State up in Dayton. So our program in general, it kind of varies what it looks like for clinical sites. Some people are still kind of doing, telehealth because they have the capability at their site to do that, kind of like the hospitals and stuff. Whereas my site, which is more a community health clinic, we don't have those resources to do telehealth. So I personally haven't been doing telehealth. I'm able to go in for about an hour to 2 hours every few weeks to do like phone check-ins, but I can't do like a full-on telehealth session with people. So that's kind of been a bummer for my personal training experience to not be able to continue. But I know some people in our program luckily do get to continue. As a whole, our program is remote for the summer semester for classes as well. I think some of us are also concerned about what that means for starting at our new practicum sites because we just got those placements. So again, it varies on the site if they're going to be able to start when we start in July or not. But our program also kind of changed the requirements needed for internships. So as a third year, I'll be applying for internship next year. And we had like hour requirements that were program specific, like so many hours total, so many interventions, stuff like that. And they got rid of, or they lowered the totals for us so that we can meet those since they know some of us aren't getting hours right now. And then they also got rid of our like 700 for the whole year requirement, which was, I think, a big stress reliever for a lot of people to know that like, I don't have to somehow come up with 700 hours when I'm just sitting at home doing a bunch of support hours and no clinical stuff. So I feel pretty supported by our program. I know I'm one of the few who doesn't really get to continue with telehealth, which stinks, but they've been supportive of me despite that, checking in to see how things are going and trying to find different things that I'm able to do. So that's kind of my experience for SOPP up in Dayton.
So I'm Lisa, a first year from the University of Cincinnati. So my experience has probably been a little more different of the barriers that we've kind of had to cross, just because we're taking classes. So the one that was affected most was our assessment class, which we are supposed to meet competencies before we enter our first placement starting in July. And the clinical faculty, they were meeting regularly because you can't practice the WACE via the computer and without the kids. So they were trying to figure out ways to prove that we were proficient in the WACE. And then we also started seeing our first therapy client this semester. And there's 5 of us first years. 2 of them are doing telehealth based off of their clients' needs. So I unfortunately am not one of them, and that's another concern going into placements. Is we really had I think I had the most of the 5 sessions, and then the other 2 had maybe 3 or 4 sessions. So it's kind of a lot of what areas are we going to be lacking in come placement. And the faculty have been very supportive and open in their communication with us, saying you're doing the best you can. Placements have reached out saying we don't expect you to be perfect with the WACE when you come here. So the amount of experience you have is acceptable, which has been reassuring, but it did kind of disrupt our typical first year learning experience.
I guess I can speak for kind of what it's been like as a second year at University of Cincinnati. So I, for various reasons, moved placement after 6 months. So I was at a new placement starting in January, and it's been a little concerning for me not being able to practice anymore because it was a switch to neuropsych, which is like relatively steep learning curve and something that I really wanted to master before leaving for my 20-hour placement. And I feel like that's been kind of just stripped away. And it's been really kind of a hard thing to try and grapple with, because the step up to third year is kind of a big difference between, watching and being a student and kind of being more of a provider. And I'm in a community mental health placement next year, and I'm a little concerned I may not have enough training to really start from the ground running like I would like to be able to. But I do feel like our program is very supportive. I do also find that the amount of emails we get is very overwhelming and hard to keep track of. So that's definitely something I feel like might be helpful to talk about here, is what really are the expectations for us? What are other programs doing? What is Ohio doing? I'm personally out of state right now, so I feel a little disconnected in that sense. And I'm definitely concerned about not accruing enough hours.
Yeah, I would just second what Julie was saying about the emails. I feel like at Xavier, we get a lot of emails as well. And I think that we kind of have the same common problems that Kristen was mentioning. Like, I'm at an inpatient unit and there's just no way to get telehealth hours right now for me. So really it's more like support hours. I am able to get some forensic hours, but a lot of that gets counted as support hours. So I am kind of, worried about my hours, but I'm guessing that the hours overall will be reduced, nationwide when it comes to applying for internships.
I can also build on everything everybody's mentioned. I kind of share that same experience right now. I'm just getting the support hours, being a second year going into third year. On one hand, I feel really lucky being a second year because we have a lot of time to maybe make the adjustments as need be, versus maybe some people later in the program. But I don't know if I'm alone in this, but it's just recently hit me this will be going on for a while. So a lot of my concerns, I kind of took it initially, go with the flow, make adjustments, it'll be okay. And I feel very supported by my program. But really looking to what are the real foundational skills we need now for something that might be going on longer than I had initially hoped, or maybe I was pretty naive in thinking it would maybe be over, shortly. So that's kind of where my concerns are.
I don't want to cut anyone off talking about generally speaking. I'm just curious kind of what your programs are doing to support mental health. I know I didn't anticipate this to kind of take a toll on me, but it's definitely changed like my motivation to do work, and it's just a lot to handle. And I don't know if other programs are being active about that or more leaving it up to you guys as students.
This is Courtney. I'm going to turn my video on so you can see me. I look rough. I prep all day. I know for Wright State, something that our associate dean has started is she's thinking about doing virtual cafes over the summer for anyone in the program to join, just to talk about our concerns, share resources. We, on our school-wide page, have like a COVID resources page that our associate dean has been uploading a lot of really helpful resources to. And then I know some advisors have started weekly or monthly virtual cafes to just kind of meet with students, talk about various things that might be going on. So I know what my advisor talked about this week, I believe, was talking to our fourth years about what it might look like starting internship via telehealth, or maybe starting late. So I think my program's been pretty proactive in terms of offering just a lot of spaces for us to meet and connect, and they're all obviously not mandatory. It's definitely like if you feel like you could benefit from this and would like to take part in it, you can, but it's not something that you are required to do. So I know that is, I think, most of what I'm aware of that our program at Wright State is doing.
I do know we recently got some information at Wright State for people who feel like they might need some more support than that, with some connections in the community at discounted rates, that sort of thing, which I thought it was actually a concern we had prior to all of this, with it just grad school taking its toll in general. So it was something that was in the works prior, but I think really especially important now.
I think this is a really important issue, and it's something a lot of people are struggling with. So I'm glad to hear that some programs for sure are making sure that students are taken care of. At Case, I feel like our faculty, were a fairly small program with around 5 in each cohort. So it's usually on a very personal basis, and I know our research advisors are checking in pretty frequently, but outside of that, regarding faculty, I know a lot of cohorts and groups of friends from programs are doing a lot of Zoom happy hours. One of my cohort mates is on here, so I don't want to call her out, but hopefully she's found it as helpful as I have, and connecting. And I think it's different in addition to any kind of connections you're having with your other friends and family, because these students get it. They're your peers, your colleagues. They are kind of going through the same struggle of maybe doing telehealth or not doing telehealth, and feeling like you're missing out. So I definitely encourage everyone to try to seek that out with their peers. I know we're all getting a little sick of Zoom though, but some other way to connect with your friends at school.
I'm a second year also at the University of Cincinnati, and one thing that I found really helpful is that our DCT has been holding bi-weekly meetings just for people to pose questions and talk about things that are going on. And she also created an anonymous submission link, so if people feel a little bit uncomfortable or maybe a little insecure about the types of questions that they want to ask, they have the opportunity to pose those, and then our DCT can respond to those during the calls. So those have been really helpful as well.
OPA's Prevention and Wellness Committee has been doing weekly self-care meetings, and I've attended all of them. I think they've had 5 so far, and they're really good. They're actually very relaxing and very peaceful. Howard Fratkin, who runs them, got his start working in the AIDS crisis, so he knows about this kind of crisis and how it impacts therapists. So he really does a good job of putting people at ease and facilitating very open and careful discussion about what's on people's minds and what's bothering them. We hear a lot about how tired everybody is just from this, that the telepsychology sessions are much more intense and tiring than just regular face-to-face. I don't know if it's because you can see yourself when you're doing therapy, which you don't usually do when you're doing therapy face to face, but it really is kind of freaking a lot of people out. So we've had a lot of really good discussion about that and how to deal with it. He always ends the session with a meditation, which I find very helpful. It kind of sends you off from the session relaxed and feeling peaceful, and that's a good place to end and to start the next day. So watch for those. We post information about them on our website, and students are welcome. So, we'd love to have you come if you want to participate or just listen. They're really helpful sessions, I think. They've helped me, and I need help.
Well, and I posted the link in our chat session, but just take a look at the Ohio Psychological Association, ohpsych.org, to see what's on the calendar. There will be another prevention and wellness program session next Tuesday, and it should be a real exciting experience. Not only is Dr. Fratkin leading that and his expertise, but we also have Dr. Steve Gravenkemper, who's an organizational psychologist. So they're trying to meld their two approaches, and they want to talk about self-care and leading in a time of disruption. So if you have nothing going on next Tuesday at 7:45 p.m., it should be a real exciting experience. And Steve is a past president of the Division of Consulting Psychology. And as Michael said, Howard just is one of our preeminent psychologists in dealing with crisis and trauma, and just a real, fantastic experience to be a part of. So do feel welcome to be a part of those.
I think too, adding onto that, in addition to the self-care and the wellness, community sessions, OPA is also putting forth a lot of other forums and other consultation groups and things that are a little bit more professionally related. Obviously, self-care is very important to our professional well-being, but things like how to conduct telepsychology and specific groups I'm working with, kids and adolescents, or a gero population. So, and if you're also feeling like you need extra kind of support or supervision, that's definitely another opportunity that we have been putting out, many of those. And I was sitting on the consultation for telepsychology one over the weekend, and it was a really helpful space where it was very specific to the concerns of telepsychology and how to facilitate that and things like that. So also keep an eye out for those too. I just wanted to add that.
I think it's important to normalize the experience for most of us, unless you're perhaps attached to the VA or if you're maybe in a practice that provides telehealth. Most of us are kind of building the plane and flying it at the same time. So your experience as graduate students are not unlike the experience that we're having as practitioners. My specialty is school psychology, and we've spent just an inordinate amount of time talking about teleconsultation, teletherapy, and teleassessment. And these are not really backgrounds that most of us come with out of grad school or even in our supervised clinical experiences. So, you know, it is okay to feel unease with this because this is an unease that all of us have in the profession. You know, just a couple of days ago, I was on with my internal med doc, just as a sidebar, and he just talked about just how awkward this is for him as a physician provider, and he's the director of a local hospital in my area. So, you know, this is challenging for all of us. And so I think it's okay for the ambiguity, the disruption, and the uncertainty. And just to tell yourself that these are really unprecedented times. And, you know, hopefully we never see something like this again, but also be aware that most of your clinical faculty probably have never seen anything like this either. So, you know, all of us are truly just trying to do the best we can and adapt and be as nimble as we can in these times.
As you kind of talk through that, Eric, one concern that's come up for me is, and I wonder if other people who are seeing clients when this all happened, if you had this experience too, just feel like the difficulty of cutting off clinical service and then starting it in a way that feels like is this ethical? Is your privacy secure? Like, I'm doing what I'm told. I hope that's right. You know, like, so I wonder if any of you guys, like as trainees, have had a similar experience where you're kind of just like uncomfortable in the uncertainty, but also like, oh, is this right? Like, do I need to know?
I have been seeing the same client for a while now, and I've been doing telepsychology with them during COVID, and it was really scary, I think, seeing how much the client was not doing well and doing telehealth and doing it for the first time and assessing for suicidality for the first time, kind of. So it was just like, I think it's a lot for anybody to take on and an additional big adjustment for like young trainees. Like I'm usually live supervised. I can't be live supervised when I'm providing telehealth through the service the like portal we provide. So it's just like I totally agree with you, Allison. And there's like so many doubts involved in it that sometimes I feel like I just have to shut off my mind and remind myself that like it's still a helpful service to the person, regardless of all of the barriers involved, hopefully.
To also speak to that, this isn't my experience because, like I said, I'm not doing telehealth, but I know a cohort member had the experience where she makes calls through an app on her phone, so it doesn't show her phone number, but where now the client feels that they can call, and so has been calling like at different times. So, you know, ethically, she's concerned about that, and then, you know, for her own well-being, how does she handle that sort of thing? So I know that's been a challenge for some people.
Yeah, I think in grad school we learn about all these like really bright lines around ethics, and we know like you do your ethics case study and make the right ethical decision, but it just feels like a really murky ethical time. I don't know if anybody else has that vibe, but yeah, I get worried about that sometimes.
I think part of it for me, Allison, this may be the case for you, is that normally we're in our protected office in often either the protected hospital setting or the protected clinic, and with our supervisors and other licensed professionals, and maybe even our own, you know, trainees right near us close that we can kind of run to if there's a problem, and you just have this feeling of a safety net. And I feel like now I sit in my house, and obviously my supervisors are able to be reached, and my peers, I can text if there's a question, you know, just in general. But I think that part of it is now you feel more alone, just because you are alone trying to do this telepsychology. And it does feel like a little bit almost like you're kind of running your own private practice just with one person. You know, and there's no one really else to run things by if you need to, if there's an issue.
I think this also brings up the importance of assessing who is appropriate for telehealth services, because yeah, if someone, you know, is gonna not understand that they can't call at any time that they want or things like that, that's really important to take into account, to like make those assessments, which is new. We haven't been doing that before, but just like to be thinking about that, because it's not true that everyone is a good fit for telehealth, unfortunately, even though we want to like provide the best service that we can for now.
And adding to that, being a first year, we are required to have live supervision, 100% no room for any leeway. And so that was kind of how they assessed who out of the first year cohort would be providing telehealth services. So they looked at each of our cases and kind of picked which ones were in crises or who this would affect most. And then also considering our ethical competence and did they think that us as therapists were fit to start telehealth. And we have a junior supervisor who is typically like a third or fourth year grad student. They kind of like zoom in, and I don't know how they do it, but they like hide their screen, and the therapist does as close, like my supervisor is still on here. So that way we are, well, not me, but the other two first years are getting supervision experience with telehealth. So I think it was, there was a lot of back and forth on deciding what to do with us, but I think they did consider both the client's needs and then also if we were even ethically competent enough to pursue this.
I mean, I will just say based on that, that sounds challenging though, to have the program kind of like judging your competence. And I think that's happening across placements too, where they, like my supervisor did my last supervision today, and like, you know, you did a great job with competent care or telehealth. It's a new competency. And I'm like, I didn't even know I was trying to prove myself on a new competency. Like I was just doing my best. And so it kind of sucks to be thrown into something where you need to show that you're professional and can keep up with it. But, you know, it's new. So it's tough.
Do remember too, though, that all of our team on this call right now probably has more fluency and confidence and competency in using new media technologies than vast majority of the people that you're interfacing with, whether it's your clients or patients, and probably more than your supervisors. So more than likely, each of you have something to teach more of your veteran folks that you're engaging with. So don't also minimize the fact that all of you have grown up in an era of these new media technologies where, you know, on some of our APA calls, you know, we're still dealing with some of the nuances of just how you do email and, you know, some of the HIPAA compliancy issues of just electronic and computer mediated communication where, you know, there are plenty of folks on this call. You've always been on social media. You always understand this technology. So don't, you know, also minimize what you bring into that too as a level of competency. So it may not be that you're able to demonstrate all the ethical principles of competency in telehealth, for example, but you probably can run circles around many of us dinosaurs when it comes to the idea of your practice competencies and just social media and computer mediated communication.
I think as well related to that is to, you know, to not be that hard on yourself. And I know it can be difficult and to get frustrated. So at my site right now, I actually see my patients through the Epic MyChart system. So we're not using Zoom. I go through their electronic medical record to initiate the video call. And there's the added layer. I'm not as familiar with MyChart, and a lot of my patients haven't used this function. So sometimes the first half of our session is us on the phone, me trying to guide the patient through this crazy, realm of my chart that I can't even see. And, at some point I feel like you just have to kind of laugh and say, I'm new at this myself, and, we'll get through this together. And I think in some ways it's also helpful for the patient too, who's probably anxious about a lot of other things. Now you've added this complicated video platform, and you can just say, hey, we're all in this together. This is new for everyone, even for me. And I'm trying to, again, just be kind with yourself too.
I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Sylvia. I'm a fourth year at Case Western Reserve University. That's all.
So I think it could be helpful to go back. One of the questions, I think, Julia, you mentioned this, was really managing the amount of emails. And I think before we kind of took off on this conversation of ethical and psychology, I thought that was really related to the self-care and mental well-being piece that Lisa brought up. So I was wondering if you guys have found any effective ways to kind of sift through the emails. I feel like myself, there's just so many, and so many have the title of COVID-19, and in there's probably nuggets of things that are really helpful. But just sometimes I feel like I'm sifting through it, especially after a long day. And if anyone's found any ways on managing this or any tips.
I can talk a little bit about what I do. So for all of the listservs that I'm a part of, this may be like a little nerdy, but I started an inbox rule. So all of the like OPA and APA listservs I'm on immediately go into OPA and APA folders in my inbox. So that helps some of that stuff go out. And then one day, I think it was Monday this week, I just went to those folders and sifted through some of them to see, was there anything important? Were they just things I can go by and not really have to pay attention to? But that helps me not have like suddenly 25 emails on my phone. And I can like set aside time to just sit down and be like, now I'll go through these folders where stuff for the past week has maybe been going. The webinars and stuff like that goes to a different folder. I don't know why, but I'm kind of glad it does, because then I don't miss signing up for some of the stuff. But for all of those emails, that's what I do. And then I've also just set like a personal rule that like school related stuff, if I get something late at night, like I'm not going to respond until the next day. Like they don't need my response at 11 p.m. So I'll just wait until the next day at like 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock in the morning to respond. So trying to set my own personal boundaries of, you may have emailed me at 10 p.m., but I'm not going to respond until the next morning.
I think that was really nicely stated. So I'm on like day, I think, 46 or 47 of working at home and assigned to work at home. And one of the challenges is trying to do endless amounts of work, servicing clients' patients, the consultation work I do. And then, of course, Michael would certainly acknowledge we have some days in OPA that it seems like our inboxes just need to go on a diet, because we just have scores and scores and scores of emails. And I've finally just taken the position that unless Rome is burning, especially on the weekends, I'm just tuning off from all of this. But when you're doing like 10, 12 hours a day of doing nothing like I'm doing, but sitting in my chair here and responding, finding ways to take breaks, to filter out, and to divert your energies, because it is so much harder to not be constantly engaged, constantly in a work process. And finding ways to practice the self-care that we talked about earlier, but also just finding ways to have your whole day also still be a part of it. We don't, by and large, have the same benefits of transitioning in and out of driving to and from work or placements. So, thankfully I have a Labrador, and I think I saw somebody on here who had a puppy that was in the middle of the tonight's call, but she reminds me periodically that it's time to go potty and do those kind of things. But, it's okay to not always be on your A game. It's also okay that you don't have to be on 14, 16, 18 hours a day. And, remember, all of us are in this work because we are committed to our clients and patients. We're also at the same time equally committed to sort of perfectionism. And, you know, this is not a time that perfectionism is always necessary. Again, sometimes you just, you know, as like AA would say, you fake it till you make it.
I think that's an important thing to remember is now we don't have like the boundaries of where you do work and where you do home or whatever else. And it's very tempting to just keep going because it's right there in front of us. So to like build that kind of routine where, you know, this is when I stop, this is when I take my breaks. I think that's been really helpful for me, at least. In terms of sifting through emails, how I've been approaching it is if it's something that I am already not super involved in and it's like pretty distant from what I'm doing, I'm not going to start now because I'm already trying to make sure I'm keeping up with all the things that I'm already involved in. And then sometimes I just like leave them unopened for the week if I know I need to get to them, but they're not urgent, while also making sure I respond to and do what I need to do with the ones that are more time sensitive.
This is kind of related to what Sylvia just mentioned, but I have found it really, really helpful to try to facilitate or create and adhere to a schedule each day. Just having a routine in this kind of chaotic time, I've found to be really, really helpful in terms of making sure that I'm not placing too much pressure on myself to respond to emails all throughout the day. I have my designated work time. I have my time that's for me, be it like going outside or having Zoom calls with friends, but just trying to create some sort of structure in my day so that I'm not too reliant on, you know, my work responsibilities and things has been really helpful for both my mental health and my productivity.
I have a personnel consultant, a psychologist, an IO psychologist who works with OPA and with me particularly. And I was checking and responding to email all the time, 2 a.m, Saturdays, Sundays, and she forbade me from doing that and said that I had to quit at 5 o'clock and not check email until the next morning, and I should not check on weekends at all. Part of the problem was that in responding to those emails, I was forwarding things to staff at like 2 a.m. So then they were getting burdened by my efforts to keep everybody involved. So I try to stick to that. I do kind of cheat sometimes and just look to see what email is there, but I don't respond to it unless it's really crazy critical. But that's worked out pretty well for me. I feel much more relaxed about dealing with email. When I get in the office, I usually have about an hour before my first conference call, and I can go through a lot of the emails that I have in that hour time. So it kind of gets my day started and get all that stuff out of the way. I just looked at my email a few minutes ago and I've gotten 50 emails since 6 o'clock. So have a lot waiting for me tomorrow, but I'm not gonna mess with it.
And I think Michael's words there are something for all of us. In fact, you know, in the interest of disclosure, sometimes on the weekends, just in our OPA leadership, we will respond to an email, and then that opens up a tidal wave of further emails, because then, of course, if you send an email, everybody feels like they have to respond to the emails. And then suddenly now we have all this diatribe going back and forth and back and forth. So, you know, I think Michael's words are also important, because it's not just sometimes when we're self-starting or initiating something, but once we perpetuate a conversation, it doesn't always end. And again, when you don't have sort of the boundaries and the kind of expected transitions of going to work and things like that, and your transition is coming to sit at your laptop or your desktop, that's a very different scenario. Or even worse, picking up, as all of us have now, smartphones, and it's so easy for us to just get ingrained. You know, my wife and I, my wife's a clinical social worker, we had to kind of put ourselves at a place to put our phones down, because we literally were many days in the last few weeks just responding to calls and texts and emails all hours of the days and night, and it just never stopped. And you know, work is not who we are. It's part of our identities, but it is not the exclusive identity that we have. And just as all of you are grad students is a part of our identities, that any of us on this call also remember those days too if you're done with grad school. But it is so incredibly hard. And you know, create those spaces. And you know, again, I can't tell you just how refreshing it is to try to not pick up laptops, tablets, smartphones on the weekends, and just say, I need to be done with this for right now. And you know, come back to it on Monday. You know, nothing that we're doing, by and large, you know, we're not trying to run the United Nations. We're not trying to solve a COVID vaccine issue. We're just trying to do the work that we need to do, whether it's being a grad student or as practitioners. Now, we have some crisis responsibilities and things like that, but again, you know, life will go on too.
Something that I've been, I work with kids, as Eric mentioned, so something I've been really preaching to a lot of my parents that I work with is the idea that you can't pour from an empty cup. And I think that applies to us too, that if we burn ourselves out with email or whatever it may be, then we can't spend that time and energy on the areas that are really necessary, whether it's our research or especially with our clinical work when we need to then provide care. And if we're burnt out, then what good are we doing to, you know, to our patients? And I think too, someone made the point that, you know, right now, schedules, although Emily, it's awesome that you made a schedule like that and a routine. I'm really envious, but it's hard where before, you know, we did have that drive. And for me, like my placement stuff kind of stayed at my placement, stayed at the hospital. But now, you know, I have my EMR access remotely, and it can be really tempting to work into the hours of the night because time really doesn't mean anything as much anymore. So those boundaries that we used to set for ourselves, I think can really just bleed into one another.
Yeah, one thing I'm wondering is, I know I've seen tons of productivity memes. Like, God, I wish I could think of an example, but I can't. But I know that like graduate students are constantly posting memes about not being able to work and trying to. And I wonder if that's other people's experience. I feel like I have days where I'm on it, and then I'll just have a day where I'm like, well, I guess I'm doing this one thing today, and that's it, which can be kind of frustrating. But yeah, I was just wondering if that's meme culture or if that's your guys' experience as well.
100%.
That's definitely been, yeah, my experience too. You're not alone.
Good to hear.
I think about it in that because I know I'm working more hours anyway, it's okay to take a Wednesday break. You know, at least that's how I think about it. Or if I do one thing, still got done. But definitely there are days that I'm like super, super productive. And I'm like, wow, it's only noon and I've done so much. And then there are other days I'm like, it's about to be 5 o'clock and tomorrow will be a new day.
Yeah, sometimes I do the tomorrow it'll be a new day, and sometimes I'm like, how dare you do this to yourself? Which I guess I always need to learn to be less hard on myself. But yeah, I think it is kind of easy for us to be hard on ourselves when our days don't go as well planned. So I try and I learned a while back about self-compassion meditations by Kristen Neff. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of her, but this idea of self-compassion has been really helpful. I also as Eric said, I'm interested in mindfulness. So I've been trying to do yoga and meditate. So it kind of helps. Try to go easy on myself. I hope you guys do too.
And, you know, really challenge that sort of Protestant westernized work ethic that we have to be productive. And when I first was assigned at work from home, I'm thinking, oh, I can do some painting, and I got some drywall to fix, and I can knock off all these honey bear do kind of lists. And then I realized there is so much stress right now in trying to navigate so many other things administratively in my work, plus my leadership work with OPA. That wasn't a fair expectation. And give yourself that permission. It's okay. Being able to just take a couple minutes or give yourself time in the afternoon, the evening, or however your day sequences, that you don't have to fix everything. You don't have to do everything. This isn't the time that you have to feel like, and all your free time you need to be studying for the EPPP. And these are really disruptive, stressful times, and allow ourselves to also experience that it's also stressful for us.
I can really relate to that, because I feel like since we haven't had as many practicum hours, it almost feels like we need to be knocking out like our dissertation goals, just because we have the extra time to do it. But it's also really hard to, like, I guess, give ourselves that time to work on our dissertation goals when we're stressed with, just trying to manage, everyday grad school stuff.
Hi, this is Jessica from Wright State. So this is my last semester of my academic career, and I go on to internship in June. And for me, I feel like the self-compassion piece has been really important, but also allowing myself to kind of mourn the stuff that I'm not going to be able to do. So my dissertation defense is on May 12th, and I have to do it over Zoom. And for me, I feel like that's such a big milestone and to get your doctorate. And unfortunately, now I have to do it not in person. And I was kind of, I don't know, maybe I'm just a dork, but I was kind of looking forward to doing that. And then tomorrow is our last class ever as a cohort together. And we have to do it over Zoom. And it's usually this big celebration, and all the other past cohorts have had it. So we're very sad about that. And as well as we usually have like a send-off party. And unfortunately that was canceled. So I feel like part of this has also been kind of mourning the stuff that we just couldn't do that were milestones in our doctoral training.
Jessica, I'm so happy you shared that, because I think that's a big part of my experience too. There's just a lot of things that we can't celebrate as we usually would. I miss people in my program, and I miss happy hours, and I think it's really starting to settle in now, the things that we've lost through COVID. And I do think it's important to take time to mourn and be sad about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, giving ourselves that time. And I think that's maybe why sometimes we just don't have the motivation or the productivity. This, our brain kind of trying to process it all and give ourselves that break that we need, and our brain telling us that we need that break. So I've been trying to, because I'm hard on myself too, and I try to get everything done. I keep trying to tell myself, like, it's okay if I don't get everything done right now.
APA actually just posted an article on this topic. It was really interesting. It was about how, I guess on social media, there has been a lot of negativity surrounding people posting, oh, I'm really upset that my graduation in-person ceremony has been canceled, or I'm really upset I'm not going to be able to go on this vacation, or I miss seeing my friends. And that some people have been very aggressive towards these sorts of comments, saying, oh, we should be, people are dying. How could you be like upset about missing your graduation? But APA was saying that it's really important for us to allow ourselves to mourn missing these experiences. I'll see if I can find the link to the article and post it in the chat, but I thought it was really interesting, and also kind of validated some of the feelings and experiences that I've been having, missing out on some things that I had planned. So
I think a lot of psychologists are going through that grief experience because they realize that things are not going to go back to the way they were before. Now that telepsychology has been tested and experienced by both psychologists and their clients, that's going to continue to be an important part of how we deliver services in the future. And that's such a change from the way things had been. And there are going to be more changes. And I think people are grieving at the loss of what they are used to.
Julie, did you want to add something today? You unmute yourself.
I was just going to say I found that that's been a pretty powerful thing to do with my clinical work, is to help validate the experiences that my client has lost from COVID. I think it's an important space to provide to people, so I totally agree.
So we have 2 minutes left. Any closing comments or last minute burning questions that can be answered within that time?
Any crises we can solve with this time?
In a solution-focused way, of course. But that's...
All right, well, I hope that this was a helpful evening for everyone. And again, the point wasn't really to come, armed with answers, unfortunately, but just to really have a space for us to share our questions and concerns. I know that there's been some, good tips that I have written down that I've taken so I can start to utilize them and, again, be kinder to myself and also to manage my emails. So thank you for that. And I really appreciate everyone sharing and being really open and honest tonight. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm really appreciative for this being a space for other OPA members to join in. Because I think as a board we meet, but we don't see OPA graduate students or other graduate students a lot. So it's really nice to connect with you guys. And thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Really quickly, I do want to plug our social media. So if you don't follow our social media, we have an Instagram, a Facebook, and a Twitter. And I'm happy to send out those links in a follow-up listserv email to everyone. But if not, I know, there's some connectivity here. So you see people can reach out to Allison and whatnot, because we do try to avoid email as much as we can and post these upcoming forums and stuff like that on our social media, and just some lighthearted memes and content to make your day a little bit brighter. So please give us a follow. And again, thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thank you all. And I shared my email. Reach out to me. As Michael will tell you, if you email me, you should hear a response within 31 seconds or less, because I live by inbox 0. If there's something on behalf of OPA that we can do for any of you, reach out, and we will certainly do our best. We are the association here for each of you, and as future psychologists, particularly whether you're just here in Ohio right now, or if you're going to be here into your career, we want you to have a relationship and be a part of our community and our family.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks. See you guys.
Thank you.
Take care. Good night.
Good night.